The film opens with showing a woman named Sandy taking her child to school. Sandy is the type of mother who really loves her child. When she returns home, she sings in the car, implying that she is very happy with her life. Upon arriving home, Sandy intends to play a game, but her intention changes when she sees some old photos and videos of her family that change her mood. She notices a file seemingly hidden by her husband, which turns out to be a scandalous video of her husband with other women. Because of this, Sandy decides to divorce her husband. Eventually, Sandy and her 2 children move to New York. Then the scene shifts to a guy named Aram walking with his parents. Aram is told by his parents to find a job related to women to forget his past. Then the scene goes back to Sandy, who is looking for a new job in New York. Thanks to her preparation and convincing manner of speaking, she eventually gets accepted. Aram also gets a new job related to women. After applying for the job, Aram immediately starts managing a cafe with his friends. At that moment, Sandy goes there to inquire about apartments nearby. Aram's friend Mitch tells Sandy that Aram would be good at babysitting. After sorting out her apartment matters, Sandy goes out with her friend named Daphne for a walk. There, she sees Aram passing by. Sandy, who had just talked about Aram to Daphne, encourages Daphne to catcall Aram. Daphne, knowing Sandy's past, advises her to date Aram to move on. But Sandy doesn't listen because she feels unsafe in the big city, especially alone. She decided to join a self-defense class for women, which happened to be where Aram worked and became the target of the girls' punches. Sandy, taking her turn to strike, eventually steps forward. Sandy, seemingly haunted by her past, ends up leaving Aram battered. The next day, Sandy visits Aram's cafe to apologize. Because Aram was said to be good at babysitting, Sandy entrusts her 2 children to him while she goes on a date. Aram ends up being taken to Sandy's apartment, and Sandy go on a date. Aram ends up looking after Sandy's 2 mischievous children. However, because Aram is basically a kind person, the children eventually obey him. On the other hand, Sandy is on a date with an older man who has diarrhea. Eventually, Sandy feels uncomfortable throughout the date because she is being touched, especially since the man just came out of the restroom. During the date, they drink some wine, and both end up getting drunk. They decide to take a taxi because the man drunk. In the taxi, the man loses control and Sandy decides to get out and walk back to her apartment. When she arrives at her apartment, Aram, who had just finished cleaning up, feels uneasy because she is drunk. Sandy apologizes for not having any cash but promises to hire Aram as the babysitter for her children in the future. After saying she'll pay him the next day, Aram immediately leaves. The next morning, Aram is having breakfast at the cafe when suddenly Sandy's children come and tell him that their mother has passed away. Panicked, Aram leaves the cafe and goes to Sandy's apartment, only to find out that Sandy is just heavily intoxicated and unable to take her children to school. Eventually, Sandy asks Aram for help in taking her children to school. In the afternoon, Sandy goes to work, and because of her hard work, she finally gets promoted by her boss. To celebrate her promotion and also to pay back Aram for his services, Sandy invites Aram to have lunch with her children. On the way back, Aram tells Sandy that he was once married but his wife ended up with someone else. After that, Aram stops by his parents' house and tells them that he has a side job babysitting. His parents get angry because the job sounds unpromising. Consequently, while taking care of Sandy's children, Aram searches for a job and attends interviews. Meanwhile, thanks to Aram looking after her children, Sandy becomes more focused on her work as well. Not only that, but Sandy also often goes on double dates with Daphne. However, due to Sandy's trauma with men, she ends up leaving her dates abruptly. At this point, Daphne starts to realize that Sandy is somewhat interested in her children's babysitter, Aram. It turns out Aram is also like that, where he often goes to bars with his friends but never manages to connect with any woman like he does with Sandy. One night, Aram and Sandy watch boxing together. While watching, Sandy seems really excited. During an intense moment in the match, the boxer falls out of the ring and Aram gets injured. Sandy takes Aram to her apartment to rest. However, In the midst of it, Sandy's ex-husband suddenly shows up, making the atmosphere uncomfortable as he tries to reconcile. Sandy, deeply disappointed, can't find the words to respond. With Aram's support, Sandy manages to confront her ex-husband until he leaves. In the morning, Mitch asked about their relationship between Aram and Sandy. It turns out Aram was hoping this relationship would work out because he had a date with Sandy that evening. Unfortunately, the date coincided with the time they were supposed to meet at the theater. So, that night, Sandy and Aram went on a theater date. There, they enjoyed the theater performance and afterwards, they met to congratulate each other because the show was quite good. To celebrate, they went to a club nearby. While they were enjoying the party, Aram's ex-girlfriend also showed up. She expressed regret to Aram for cheating on him. However, Aram, who had already met Sandy, ignored his ex-girlfriend's words. After the party, they both went home. Daphne asked about how their date, but Sandy pretended to be disappointed so that Daphne would leave quickly. It turns out Sandy was hiding Aram. They were both ready to do some hormone activities, but when they were in the heat of the moment, Sandy's child woke up, and the hormoning had to stop. Days went by, and they unknowingly grew closer. Then their relationship became more serious, where Aram could join Sandy's much older work colleagues. Sandy also came to Aram's parents' house to celebrate his birthday. Until one day, Sandy was at work, she felt something different within herself. It turns out Sandy was positively pregnant. Sandy finally told Aram, and in the morning, they went to a doctor. There, the doctor tested Sandy's fetus before finally saying that the fetus wouldn't survive long because of its position outside the uterus. Hearing that, Aram and Sandy immediately become in a bad mood and start overthinking. Consequently, Sandy can't think clearly. Eventually, she decides that Aram is still too young to be her partner. Aram, unable to accept it, pleads with her at first. But eventually, Aram decides to bid farewell to Sandy's children before they truly part ways. After that incident, Sandy becomes a woman who continually pursues her career. It goes the same with Aram, who's now working in an office. And when he has free time, he often travels around the world. This leads Aram to meet several women who seem interested in him, but not Aram, whose heart still belongs to Sandy. Long story short, 5 years have passed, during which Aram has become successful in his career and social activities. Sandy has also been promoted to a journalist at a television station. They accidentally meet at a restaurant. Aram talks to Sandy while bringing his adopted child. Suddenly, Aram's mother arrives, and they are still as friendly as before. Eventually, both families decide to dine together at one table. The film ends with Sandy and Aram holding hands as a sign that they will continue the relationship that has been hanging in the balance all this time.